Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is Julian Voloch. I'm the Director for Strategic Partnership and Special Events at Bechol Lashon, and I welcome you to this Kabbalat Shabbat celebration. Each month, Bechol Lashon celebrates Jewish diversity, featuring musicians, scholars, spiritual leaders from around the world in online Kabbalat Shabbat services. And today, Falamos Judezmo will celebrate a Ladino Kabbalat Shabbat in the Sephardic tradition of Salonica, Jewry. For those on Facebook, a CD and PDF format can be found beneath the video, as well on our website, globaljews.org. I want to thank our co-sponsors, PJ Library and La Menadat Sephardi, the Sephardic Brotherhood of America, the University of Washington's Sephardic Studies Program, as well as our promotional partners, the American Sephardi Federation and Hillel at Hunter College. Just a quick run through today's program. We have Professor Devin Naar from the University of Washington, and he will talk about Ladino, Sephardic traditions, and also the community of Salonica. Rabbi Nissim Elnecavé will lead the service, and music will be provided by the amazing Ladino singer Sarah Aroeste. Actually, the second song that she will be singing today was actually the inspiration for her PJ Library book. So some of you might be familiar with this. So, and now, with no further ado, I'll pass the virtual microphone to Sarah.
Thank you. The first song I'll be singing tonight is called Shabbat. It is by Judy Frankel, and the words are by Rita Gabe Simintov, who is someone who survived the Holocaust from Greece. She's from Athens, actually, and she became a beautiful Ladino poet. And it is such a pleasure to share this song with you, one that is about passing traditions on from generation to generation, which is exactly what we're doing tonight. So I offer you some Shabbat. Mea kodro de mi nonna cada viernes por la tarde como lei hablaba siempre a su nuera, mi madre. Ay de filla regalada, quítate el devantar, métete vestido limpio, que ya llega el Shabbat. La comida ya está pronta y la mesa se metió. Las candelas encendidas, tu familia ya entró. Ay de filla regalada, And now I'm going to pass it over to Professor Devin Naar.
Thank you, Sarah, for that wonderful song to help us welcome in our program and Shabbat. My name is Devin Naar, and I'm the chair of the Sephardic Studies program at the University of Washington in Seattle. And it's my pleasure to be here with you all today. Shabbat Shalom. And just so you know, in the Sephardic custom, the response to Shabbat Shalom is Shabbat Shalom umevorach. So try with me. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom umevorach. Very, very nice. I'm very grateful, as I know that Chacham Elnecavé and Sarah Aroeste as well, for Bechol Lashon's efforts to host this program and for all of our co-sponsors as well. An opportunity to provide some access to the customs of the Sephardim. And when we say Sephardic Jews among ourselves, when we speak about ourselves, this is how we call ourselves, Sephardim, 4 syllables, Sephardim. Now, what does it mean to be a Sephardic Jew? This is a term that is a contested term. There are many different definitions and frameworks to think about it. The one that we're going to be using today is to be thinking about it in cultural, genealogical, and geographical terms. So I'd like to share with you a few images to help us tell the story of the Sephardic Jews to bring us into the program for today. So, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and the dispossession of the indigenous peoples of the Americas began. But also that same year, Jews and also Muslims were expelled from Spain, and Jews went to a variety of different places. It was a very important Jewish community living in Spain at that time. And the trajectory that we're going to be focusing on today are those Sephardic Jews who wound up traversing the Mediterranean eastward and settling in what was then the Ottoman Empire, which was ruled from Istanbul by the Sultan, who was also the Caliph, the head of the Sunni Muslim community. And Jews were provided with the opportunity to reside in the Ottoman Empire, to practice their religion, to speak their language, and to maintain their own sort of institutions in exchange for special taxes and recognition of their slightly lower status in that environment. But it provided an opportunity for Jewish customs and practices and community life to really thrive and develop. And if we zoom in here, thinking about the Ottoman imperial framework is very, very important, because now our world is really divided into nations and states. But for 400 years, the Jews of the Ottoman Empire were united from what is today Greece and Bulgaria and Yugoslavia and Turkey and beyond. And very important communities of Sephardic Jews and their descendants established important hubs in places like Istanbul or Salonica, which we're going to be talking about more today, the island of Rhodes. Down here is Izmir, and the town of Monastir over here, and also going into what is today the land of Israel, into Jerusalem and Sfat or Safed. These became part of one interconnected Ladino-speaking Sephardic communal kind of universe with shared traditions, practices, and language, but a variety of different variations on that theme. One of the unifying features of these communities was the Ladino language, also known as Judeo-Spanish or Judezmo. And for those of you who may not be familiar, you can think about it a little bit in parallel to Yiddish for the Ashkenazi Jews, insofar as that Ladino was based on an older style of Spanish that Sephardic Jews brought with them when they were kicked out of Spain. And when they arrived in the Ottoman Empire, they amalgamated that language, and not only Castilian Spanish, but also Aragonese and Portuguese, not only with Hebrew components, which would be very, very important, but also with the cultural environments of their new surroundings. So in Ladino, there's a very strong and important influence of Turkish and of Arabic and of Greek, and by the time we get to modern times, of Italian and of French. All of the while, the Hebrew alphabet was used to write the Ladino language, and even in a style that no longer is in use today. So here you can see the language, por mis queridos parientes, caro papa. This is a letter that was written in my family. And that's another thing that unites Sarah Aroeste, Chacham Elnecavé, and myself, is that we all have family roots connected to the city of Salonica and to the broader world of the Ladino-speaking Jews. The Ladino language was a language for all occasions. It was a language of the home and of the street, of the marketplace and of community administration, of food and song, of rabbinic commentary, ethics and philosophy, as well as popular poetry, of journalism and theater, of politics and satire. It was a language for all occasions that is on the verge of meeting its end. One of the other unifying features that connected the Sephardic communities in the Ottoman Empire was the music and the musical traditions. Both popular music, which would be represented by these women here wearing traditional Ottoman Sephardic clothes at the turn of the 20th century, but a style of music that was also used in the synagogue, was very much a product of the broader environment of the Ottoman Empire. A style of music that was based on the Middle Eastern or Ottoman Turkish makam system, which is different from our standard Western musical notations. It uses a lot of minor scales, even for uplifting songs, and it involves sometimes quite a bit of improvisation. And it is the result of interactions between Jews and their Muslim neighbors. And the makam musical scales are shared in variations among Sephardic Jews, Turks, Arabs, Greeks, and Armenians. And today, when Chacham Elnecavé will share some of the prayers for Kabbalat Shabbat, he will be sharing them in a melody set in the makam nehavent. Now, let's bring us to the specific city of inspiration for today, which is the city of Salonica. What is interesting about the city of Salonica, one among many factors, is that from 1492 until the 20th century, Sephardic Jews who spoke Ladino comprised approximately 50% of the population of this city, which was one of the largest cities in the Ottoman Empire, and today known as Thessaloniki. It is the second largest city in all of Greece. Jews in Salonica could be found in all social and economic strata within the city. There were port workers and shoe shiners, pumpkin seed and fruit vendors, such as you see here, factory workers, merchants and shop owners, industrialists and teachers, doctors and journalists, even gangsters. It was a kind of full-service Jewish community. And one of the most defining features of this community was the way in which the Sabbath, in which Shabbat imprinted every aspect of the city. So influential were the Jews in Salonica that the entire port and commerce in general came to a standstill from Friday night until Saturday night in observance of the Jewish Sabbath, that contributed to a dynamic that rendered the city the Jerusalem of the Balkans, as it was once known, as the Shabbatopolis, as the city of the Jewish Sabbath. And indeed, there were over 200 rabbis in Salonica, my own great-grandfather among them, and they operated nearly 60 synagogues, many of which were named after the cities or regions in Spain, Portugal, Italy, and elsewhere from which they came. I would also like to point out that in the Sephardic custom, the synagogue is not called shul or temple, but rather the appropriate terms are kol or keilah. It is also important to point out, we're going to talk about the layout a little bit later, but I'd also like to mention that, to get a little bit of a sense of the Sephardic mindset and the way in which the Sephardic mentality permeated the religious realm, the Sephardic world, including in Salonica, did not break down into different denominational movements that splintered Ashkenazi and European Judaism into Reform, Orthodox, Conservative, and other kinds of denominations, but rather, in the context of the Sephardic world and in Salonica, there were just Jewish synagogues. Of course, there were people who were not observant to in terms of all of the commandments and everything like that. There was a wide variety of styles of practice and observance, and those who were less strict about it, they were called the Livianos de Judezmo, those who had a lighter or less observant approach to Judaism. Now, a series of wars culminating in World War I, began to break down this kind of unified and interconnected world of the Ladino-speaking Jews of the Ottoman Empire. And in the place of this unified world, the Jewish communities began to be divided up by new nation states: Greece, Turkey, Bulgaria. The British would take over Palestine, etc., etc. And one of the results of this transformation in the Ladino-speaking Sephardic world was that many people began to leave. They brought with them, although it was very difficult to transmit, transport, and adapt them to the new environments, all across the world, including to the United States. And here you can see an image of the Salonica restaurant and cafe, which was kasher, it was kosher, on the Lower East Side. And in places like New York, New Jersey, Seattle, and many communities and cities between the coasts of the United States, new Sephardic communities were planted, grew, and thrived over the course of many decades. Back in Salonica, however, the world of the Jerusalem of the Balkans would soon come undone as a result of the Nazi occupation of the city. The Holocaust would decimate the Jews of Salonica. 50,000 Jews, approximately a quarter of the entire city's population, would be deported to their deaths at Auschwitz-Birkenau in 1943. Many of the Jewish institutions, all of the synagogues, with the exception of one or two, the Jewish cemetery, were all destroyed. And today, 1,000 Jews remain in a city whose population is 1 million. Our opportunity today to experience a glimpse of the traditions of Salonica is a testament not only to this great community, but also a chance to recognize and embrace the diversity of Jewish and Sephardic traditions that still remain living in the world and right here in the United States. We will discover just how influential the Sephardic and Salonican customs have been on all Jews later on. But for now, I would like to turn it over to Chacham Elnecavé, who will chant Psalm 29. And I would just like to also acknowledge that among the Sephardim, the rabbis are known as Chachamim. So hopefully you can take away a little bit of vocabulary that will sensitize you to the particular style and approach of the Sephardim. And for me, hearing Psalm 29 immediately calls to mind my great uncle Raphael Robert Bayes, who was at the Sephardic congregation in New Jersey, where I grew up as a small boy. Shabbat Shalom. Bechavod, Chacham Elnecavé.
Thank you, Professor Devin, Naar. And thank you for the opportunity to be here in this fantastic organization. Rabbi Nissim Elnecavé. I'm currently the director of the Sephardic Jewish Brotherhood of America, which, by the way, originally many of these societies or brotherhoods that were created over 100 years ago. One of the big brotherhoods was the Salonica Brotherhood that we think it came together somewhere around 1917, somewhere around back then. Kabbalat Shabbat. Our rabbis teach us that Shabbat starts two ways. Either when the clock, the stars, meaning the sun goes down, I'm sorry. When the sun goes down, Shabbat begins a few minutes right before, and either Shabbat starts that way, or there's another way to begin Shabbat. If the community that lives in that city, we're talking usually very small cities, there's one congregation, and that congregation gets together in the Kal, in the Keilah, in the synagogue, and they all pray together. The Talmud says, when the Hazan, the cantor, the leader of the prayer, says Barechu, meaning, are we ready to bless for the night, for the evening prayer? Shabbat begins, because they're all accepting Shabbat in their minds. Shabbat has started, so we begin Shabbat that way. Interestingly enough, at some point, somewhere down after many, many years of that practice, a new practice began. And the practice that we find in all the old sidurs, the books of prayer, we find that there was Psalm 92, Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbat, which was the psalm that they used to practice to begin the Sabbath as a congregation. But all of a sudden, in the mid-1500s, there's a sea change in many communities. The Sephardic communities were very, very strongly impacted by this, because there was a great gathering of incredible rabbis in the city of Safed and Sefat, northern Israel today. And many of these great teachers were Kabbalistic, they were mystics. And they introduced new rituals based on their mystical teachings and their Kabbalistic teachings. One of those great rabbis, unbelievable, Hacham, his name was Moshe Cordovero. It tells us where the family came from. They were refugees from Cordova, from Spain, Cordova. And he's one of these great, great mystics. And he helped us organize the prayer the way we do it today. We start with this Mizmor in most of our communities, in our synagogues, Psalm 29, because one of the reasons that they explain, it says 7 times, Kol Adonai, the voice of God, 7 times, 7 statements, 7 times God. We have the days of creation, 6 days of creation, the 7th day, a day of rest. So we have 7 here. So the mystics decided that this was a very important psalm for us to introduce the Sabbath, the Shabbat. We usually stand during the beginning when we recite this Mizmor. I'll be reciting it with a tune that's very, very common in the Sephardic communities. We use it sometimes here, or we use it when we take this back, the Sefer Torah, at the end of the reading of the Torah on Saturday mornings. It's a beautiful tune. It's a very happy tune. And so it goes this way. Mizmor le David, Avol Adonai bene Elim, Avol Adonai kavod va'oz, Avol Adonai kavod shemo hishtahavol Adonai, vehadrat kodesh kol Adonai al hamayim el hakavod im Adonai al mayim al mayim al mayim rabim kol Adonai va'koach kol Adonai behadar kol Adonai shover arazim vayshaber Adonai et arze halevanon vayarkidem kemo egel levanon v'Sion kemo ben Eremim kol Adonai Hoseh l'avot eshkol Adonai Yahil midbar Yahil Adonai midbar kadesh kol Adonai Yeholel ayalot Vayehesof ye'arot Uhechalo kulo omer kavod Adonai lamabul yashav vayeshev Adonai melech leolam Adonai osne amo iten Adonai yevarech there's a beautiful, beautiful tune to it. We have a very dear friend who was born in Salonica. His family left Salonica in the early, I'd say probably in the mid-1930s. His name is Yehuda Tzvi, and I reviewed this tune with him. I told him, is this a Salonica tune? He said, yes, yes, this is a Salonica tune. So we're doing all Salonica tunes tonight. Thank you, and now we'll hear again from Professor Devin Naar.
Chazak u'varuch, Chacham Elnecavé. That was really marvelous. It really brought me back to my own youth at the congregation Etz Chaim in New Jersey, thinking about my family and growing up there, and also the time that I spent in Salonica. Same melody, still used. It's really remarkable. Chazak u'varuch, by the way, is what the Sephardim say as a kind of congratulatory statement after you do something like Chacham Elnecavé did. You say Chazak u'varuch, and the response, there are some different responses. You could say Chazak ve'amatz, which means essentially, may you be strong and have courage. We're now going to move into sort of the cornerstone, the centerpiece of the Kabbalat Shabbat service. And as Chacham Elnecavé already alluded to, we may not always think about this, but really the Kabbalat Shabbat service that is practiced by Sephardim, by Ashkenazim, by Mizrahim, by all different kinds of Jewish communities all across the world, the order and the arrangement originated in the Ottoman Empire among Sephardic Jews in the 16th century. And the cornerstone of the Kabbalat Shabbat in some ways is the poem, the prayer Lachadodi, one of the poems, the prayers that welcomes in the Sabbath, welcomes in the Shabbat. And Lachadodi was composed by a gentleman by the name of Shlomo Alkabetz. Now, if you've ever been to a Friday night Shabbat synagogue before, for sure you have encountered Lachadodi. But did you know that Lachadodi was composed, written by a Sephardic Jew born in Salonica, Shlomo Alkabetz? He became part of that very important Kabbalistic circle that Chacham Elnecavé referred to earlier with Moshe Cordovero and others in Svat, in Safed, which was also part of the Ottoman Empire. Lachadodi is essentially a poem that metaphorically welcomes in the Shabbat bride or the queen, the divine presence into the Keilah, into the community. So every time you participate in a Kabbalat Shabbat service in the future, I hope you will retain an awareness of where it came from. And you will think about and acknowledge the Ladino-speaking Sephardic Jews of the Muslim world of the Ottoman Empire who brought the Chadodi and our order of Kabbalat Shabbat as we know it to all the Jewish communities in the world. That is our inheritance. And in case you should ever forget, if you take a look at the verses of Lachadodi, Shlomo Alkabetz literally left his mark because the stanzas of Lachadodi are arranged as an acrostic which spells out his name, Shlomo Alkabetz. So you should never forget that this song, Lachadodi, and the Kabbalat Shabbat service is a product of the Salonican, Sephardic, broader Ottoman Jewish universe. I will bring it now back to Chacham Elnecavé, who will share with us Lachadodi. B'chavo.
Thank you, Professor Devin E. And thank you for those words. Lachadodi, such a beautiful way to introduce the Shabbat. And so here is a tune that we learned from Salonica, from the Hazanim many years ago, Shemuel Rekanati and his family. Makam Nihalet. Lechadodi likrat kana pene Shabbat nekavela. Often, there is like an introduction in the singing, and this has introduced almost as a taksim. the music that we're going to sing for the Lechalodi. Shamor vezachor bedibor echad ishmi anu elah meyuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad leshem u'letiferet velitina likrat Shabbat bekuven elecha ki mekor haberacha merosh mikedem nesuha sof maaseh mahashavat tehilah. At this point, many times in Sephardic communities, we switch off. There's one, the Hazan started us off, and maybe sometimes in some of our communities, some of the people in the crowd join in and take a piece if they have already learned the tune. And the more you hear the tune, the more you're picking it up. So we would expect that by the fourth paragraph, you're already picking up the tune. So maybe you sing along with us. Mikdash melech im meluchah u'misei mitoch ha'hafecha rav elach shevet be'emek ha'bacha vehu ya'amol alayich emra Idnari me'afar kumi mivshi bigdeh tif'atecha aliyah ben Yishai bet alachmi koreva el nafshi ge'ala Hiva orech, kumi ori, shir daberi, kevod Adonai, alayich nigla, lo tevoshi velo tikalemi, ma tishtohahi, ומה תהמי בך יהסו עניי עמי ונבנתה עיר אל תדע והיו נשיסה שוסייך ורחקו כל מבלעייך יסיס עלייך אלוהייך תמסוס חתן על כלם ימין ושמאל תפרוסי ואת אדוני תריסי על יד איש בן פרסי ונשמחה ונגילה בואי בשלום עטרת בעלה גם בשמחה ברינה וצהולה תוך אמונה עם סגולה בואי כלה תוך אמונה עם סגולה בואי כלה שבת מלכנו Hazan takes over, and he says a small phrase in order for everybody to sort of accept the Shabbat at this point. Baruch Adonai Asher natan menucha le'amo Yisrael B'yom Shabbat Kodesh. We've made a statement with our own mouths, in a sense, of the fact that we've accepted Shabbat. Of course, we haven't accepted Shabbat at this point, but this is what we would do in a regular service in our synagogues. At this point, we go into the regular, what we call the Arvit. Arvit is chanted usually to that makam that was sang, that mode, that musical mode that was sang during Mizmor LeDavid, the Chadodi, and we pray, we say the Shema. After the Shema, there is all sorts of pieces that are recited and sang. Then there is the very important part, the Amidah, the silent prayer. And after the Amidah, we say what we call the Ne'en Sheva, the repetition of the Amidah, which was made originally for the people that came late to synagogue. We'll explain that another time. And then afterwards, a psalm, Aleinu L'Shabeach, and then one of the most beautiful hymns that we recite, we call it the Yigdal. And the Yigdal was, from what we understand, was composed maybe somewhere around the 1500s. It's a little bit of a mystery how this hymn, this piyut, came together. It is believed that it was composed by a rabbi by the name of Daniel ben Yehuda Dayan. And it's based on the 13 principles of Judaism, something that our great teacher Maimonides wrote much extensively about. And in this Yigdal, what we find is, of course, all those principles, the principle of our belief in God, that God is eternal, that there is no corporeality, there's no body to God, that God is omnipotent, that the Torah is true, that we believe in justice, that we believe in kindness, and that hope, and that is great, right? The hope for always things to get better. And that's the hope for the Moshiach and so on and so forth. It's that mindset that we should always look at life positively. Things will get better. And so we have a beautiful tune that we reviewed, we learned from the Hazan Ben Sion Netanel, who was also Salonican from Salonica. And it's also a tune that's well known in the Sephardic communities all over the world. And it goes like this. Makam Nihavet. Yigdal Elohim Hai Ve'ishtaba Nimsa Venet El Mesiuto Ehad Ben Yachid Keyihudo Ne'elam Vegam En Sof Le'ahduto En Elo Demotaguf Ve'eno Guf Lo Naruch Elav Kedushato Kadmon Lekol Davar Asher Nivra Rishon Ben Reshit LeReshito Hino אדון עולם, לכל נוסר יורה גדולתו ומלכותו, שפע נבואתו נתנו אל אנשי סגולתו ותפארתו. לא קם בישראל כמו שעוד נביא ומביט את תמונתו. תורת אמת נתן לעמו אלה, על יד נביאות נאמן ביתו. לא יחליף האל ולא ימיר דתו לעולמים לזולתו. סופר ויודע צאתנו, מביט לסוף דבר בקדמותו. גומל לאיש חסיד כמפעלו, נותן לרשע כרשעתו. ישלח לקץ ימים משיחנו, לפדות מהככס ישועתו. מתים יחייל ברוח הזו, ברוך עד שם תהילתו. תורת משה אמת ונבואתו, ברוך עד שם תהילתו. That concludes usually the service in Bet Knesset, in the Keilah, and then we very joyfully we go home, because we expect great things to find home, the family, the warmth of what's happening there. And we're going to give it over to Sarah Aroeste now, so she can tell us a little bit about that, please.
Thank you. Here is a song that I wrote called Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. And I wrote it for families to learn some Ladino words and how joyous Shabbat can be in our homes. So I'm going to need some help to sing this. So if you could get your clapping hands out, I'm going to ask you to clap 4 times every time I sing Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, just like this. Buen Shabbat, 1, 2, 3, 4, Shabbat Shalom. Buen Shabbat, 1, 2, 3, 4, Shabbat Shalom. Again. Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Great. It's Friday night, el viernes. Come enjoy, gozaremos. Ha! Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Light the candles, las candelas. Sing some songs, las canticas. Ha! Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Say kiddush for wine el vino. Wash your hands, las manos. Ha! Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Buen Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Itachala lachala. Bless the family, la familia. When Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. When Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. When Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. When Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Come together and juntos. Peace for all, para todos. Ha! When Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. When Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. When Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. When Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Now I'm going to pass it back to Professor Devin Naar.
Thank you, Sarah. That was lovely. And I think what your song demonstrates is, just as we spoke about the creativity of Sephardic Jews after being expelled from Spain, coming to a new place, the Ottoman Empire, and developing new creativity to develop the Kabbalat Shabbat service. This creativity has not gone away. We see it now being reinvigorated in our own times in the 21st century, in yet another land even further away here in the United States. What Sarah's song has done for us is brought us from the kal to the kaza, from the synagogue to the home. And thinking about family and thinking about community is very, very important in the Sephardic tradition and the Jewish tradition. And it's even embedded in the way in which the synagogue is oriented. In the Sephardic synagogue, you do not sit traditionally in pews, everybody looking forward. You face each other kind of in a round. You look at faces and you develop a very strong sense of community in that way. And that sense of community is then transferred into the kaza, into the home. And you have that same sense around the table for the Shabbat meal. And when you think about community and you think about family in the Sephardic tradition, another concept is very important in that context, and that is alegria, happiness. Joy and happiness are very, very important in the celebration of Shabbat. Your Friday night meal might involve probably no meat, customarily among the Ladino-speaking Jews, but perhaps dairy and fish, a pastel, kind of like a Sephardic pie filled with mincemeat or cheese. In the winter, maybe squash or berenjena, eggplant, spinaca, spinach. In the summer, to be accompanied by salads or maybe arroz and garbanzos, rice and beans. And for dessert, you might have some bizcochos, some cookies like bizcochos or taralicos or rosquitas, plus, of course, dried fruits and nuts and ubiquitous pepitas, which are roasted pumpkin seeds. I'm gonna have to stop because I'm getting very hungry myself, and I want to focus on the task at hand. We can have a whole other thing about Sephardic foods and customs related to food and everything like that. But when you enter into the home, one of the things traditionally you might do is you might perform the custom of beza las manos. You might kiss the hand, the child, the grandchildren of the father or the patron of the home as a sign of respect. And one of the things that you will do to welcome in the Sabbath in the home would be to light the candelas, as Sarah informed us in her song. And I would like to just indicate that one of the elements that distinguished the traditional way in which Sephardim lit the candles for Shabbat is that we have traditionally not used wax candles, as is customary in the United States these days, but the traditional Sephardic way is to use wicks in oil. This is the traditional way, and in oil lamps. And the other thing to note is that the blessing would be recited before the lighting of the candles. And so we're going to now invite Sarah Aroeste to show us her beautiful oil candelas para Shabbat, and she will light them for us. Sarah.
I will begin by saying the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. And now I invite Hacham Elnecavé.
Thank you, Professor Devin and Sarah Aroeste. Beautiful recitation. So we'll make Kiddush. Usually we would make the Kiddush standing. And of course, our whole event is very important for us, the education. So we sing complete berachot with the intent of this to be educational. Makam Nihavet. Yom HaShishi vayikul hashamayim v'kol tzevam vayikal Elohim hayom asher b'melachto asher asa vayishpot bayom hashevi mikol melachto asher asa vayivak Elohim hayom asher yakar zoto Shabbat mikol melachto asher bara Elohim elasot sabrim alanan baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagefen baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'nasavanu Shabbat kodsho v'yavav v'rasonim chilanu zikaron b'maaseh bereshit achila l'mikrae kodesh zecher yitziat b'Yisrael v'Shabbat kodshecha v'yavav v'rasonim ha'etanu baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. We'll hear now from Sarah Aroeste some other beautiful things.
Thank you. We're going to end this beautiful service by singing one of the most classic traditional Ladino songs, Avram Avinu, also known as Cuando el Rey Nimrod. If you know it, I hope that you will sing and clap along at home. It is a song that is sung at every joyous occasion, every simcha, and would of course be sung on Friday evenings. So thank you for joining us. Here we are with Avram Avinu. Cuando Rey Nimrod al campo salía, miraba en el cielo y en la estrellería, vido luz santa en la jurería, que vi renacer Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel, Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. La mujer de Terra quedó preñada, día en día él la preguntaba, de quién es Sarah, la desnudada, y ella sabía el bien que tenía. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Saludemos al compadre y también al Moel, que por su zehut nos venga el Goel y rima a todo Israel. Cierto lo haremos al verdadero. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avinu, Padre querido, Padre bendito, luz de Israel. Abraham Avinu, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I'm going to pass it back to Bechol Lashon.
Thank you so much, Devin, Sarah, Necavé. This was wonderful. Also, I want to say thank you to Rabbi Roof, who tirelessly worked behind the scenes, Marcella in the marketing department, and of course, Andrew for his technical supervision. Last but not least, our founder, Diane Tobin, who is a tireless advocate for celebrating Jewish diversity. Just want to say, we just got some locations, not only from all over the US, Berlin, Buenos Aires, Cape Town, Istanbul, Mexico City. Thank you all for coming. This was a truly global Jewish celebration. Our next Kabbalat Shabbat service will be on September 11th, celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. For more information about Jews around the globe, visit globaljews.org. Shabbat Shalom, and we're done. Thank you.